All right. Well, I'm pleased to be joined by Randal Dietrich, Executive Director of the Minnesota Military and Veterans Museum. Just coming off a groundbreaking event that I believe was held on Sunday for the new museum in at Camp Ripley in Little Falls. Is that right, Randall?
That's correct. Yes, we held our ceremonial groundbreaking and dedication of the 32 acres up at Camp Ripley this past Sunday, September 17th.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. And it's not often that we just talk about a single project here on the podcast or in our Q&A, but this is a pretty cool project. So we're going to take some time to really focus on this and kind of the history of how you got here and what you have planned, what's in store for us at the museum. So I guess, first of all, congratulations to getting to this point. And tell us a little bit about the museum itself. I know I believe it's a 40,000 square foot facility and it will be unique in the nation. Tell us a little bit about that and what makes it unique.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate the interest, and I agree with you. It's something that we want to be talking about. So I really enjoyed the opportunity to speak with you today. It will be probably one of the more unique partnerships in the country when we're all done. The construction process, the funding for the design and construction is all state supported, state funded, which is unique in some right there. Was a result of efforts at the state legislature over a number of years. Working with state officials, both on the left and right side of the aisle, to bring together this plan, and that resulted in a $32 million state-funded building. Representative Ron Krisha out of the Little Falls area was certainly instrumental. It's his backyard after all, but also great statewide support from other legislators in St. Paul. Senator Nicole Mitchell, a veteran herself in the Senate, was certainly helpful. Representative Jerry Newton in the metro area also was a real advocate for us. So, in one way, it being terribly unique is that the public-private partnership that it takes to make this happen at this level in this day and age, I suppose. So that state money, that $32 million is all state taxpayer money, and we certainly appreciate that, but I think we're going to put it to a terribly good use. That's probably long overdue. And what follows that public support, of course, is an ongoing private fundraising effort to outfit that facility with galleries, classrooms, and collection spaces befitting of service of veterans since statehood.
Okay. You mentioned the bipartisan support. I looked back on the story I wrote in April. It sounds like this was part of a bill that passed 131-0. So you can't get much more bipartisan than that. But tell us a little bit more about, now this replaces a smaller existing museum at Camp Ripley. Is that correct? Tell us about that and kind of some of the expanded programming and artifacts and things like that we'll see at the new museum.
No, you're absolutely right, and I appreciate the follow-up story from your earlier one this spring. Our current museum has been in existence for more than 4 decades, actually dating back to 1976, so almost 5 decades at this point. It's been within the walls of Camp Ripley all those years, and so it really has been making the best of what we have, where we're at with what we have at the time. So over those decades, veterans came together to form this organization. Over that time, people have been donating artifacts and items from their own military service in many cases. So we've been a repository for those items for that many years, and we outgrew the capacity to showcase those pieces long ago. We have something in the neighborhood of 80,000 artifacts under our care right now. So for your readers and listeners who might have been to Camp Ripley to see our museum over all those years, what they see is actually just, of course, a small sampling of what's actually available. And that's not terribly unusual for museums, but in our case, it certainly seemed to be becoming rather extreme, where we had no capacity to showcase stories of veterans post 9/11, because we ran out of space for storytelling pre 9/11, 2001. So yes, we've been there for more than 40 years. There was a clear need to have a new space to bring our collection under one roof. Our current campus at Camp Ripley is not one building, but actually almost a dozen small buildings, which again has been great as a resource, but also inefficient for lots of different reasons. So the chance to bring our collections under the same roof as our library and as our museum gallery is, a real game changer for us. And I'll just add quickly, another reason for the move was our proximity to the airfield at Camp Ripley. So right across Infantry Road on the campus of Camp Ripley, which is some 53,000 acres, lies our museum. And when C-130s fly in to do touch and goes or training for National Guard exercises, it's almost as if you can reach up and touch the bottom of that C-130 as it lands, which you can't do, but it seems like you almost could if you imagined yourself as such, which from one perspective, it's terrific. It's a terrific learning opportunity and interpretive chance to showcase and tell people about our current military and the important work that they do. Because what will happen is you hear that C-130 coming from a ways away, everybody exits the current facility to look up outside and see the airplanes right over the top of them, which is terrific. But at the same time, predictably, the FAA did tell us a number of years ago that for many reasons, not the best place to be located at the edge of an airstrip. So their instruction to us was to find a new site. And thankfully, our board of directors, along with state legislators, have gotten us to this point here.
And how big is the current site, and where exactly is it in relation to the existing facility? Can you walk us through that for people who might be familiar with the layout of the area?
Yeah, it's such a location is so important for every effort like this, right? And being inside the walls of Camp Ripley all these years, we've occupied a public space of about 5,000 square feet. So if again, visitors have been there in the past, about a 5,000 square foot space. What we are moving to is a building that brings together those individual buildings I mentioned, some of which the public can access and some of which they can't, but that will total a 40,000 square foot space. So to move from a publicly accessible space of 5,000 to more like 40,000, again, is a great opportunity to really showcase in complete detail, as much as is reasonably possible, the stories of, Minnesota's 300,000 veterans who have served since the Civil War. So the space will certainly change. The accessibility will also change as well. There are signs outside of Camp Ripley. If you're in transit between the Twin Cities and the Brainerd Lakes area, you pass by the tank on the highway, which people often know. Say, oh yeah, the tank there, just north of Little Falls, and that's the exit for Camp Ripley, and that's where our current museum is. But to pass through the gate, the public is welcome to do so. It doesn't always understand or know that they can do that to see our public museum, but in this case, that won't be an issue anymore. Our new location, right off of the highway, literally right off the highway at 371, Highway 371 and Highway 115, are those 30 acres that were donated to us for this project, and the chance to be out there right along the highway is terribly important for accessibility. I'd also note that in addition to the proximity and accessibility, being adjacent to the Little Falls Veteran Cemetery is also an opportunity for us to, I think, to really serve Minnesota veteran families in a pretty dramatic kind of way.
And I understand you've been working with HGA on design. Tell us a little bit about that and maybe some of the signature design features or the approach that the team took with designing this facility.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. Yeah, HGA has been our partner for a number of years in this case. They've been patient with us for sure. They're a first flight architectural firm, with national reputation, but like other projects that you maybe talked about, the pandemic kind of fell at the wrong time for our plans for construction. So that necessitated a pause in planning and a refiguring in some ways. So they've been great just to kind of weather the storm with us on that front. We're happy to be at the point where we are now. they've, I think, come up with a design that's fitting a facility that will be part of Camp Ripley. A few design features that I'm, really excited about is a formal parade ground on these 32 acres. 30 acres is a lot of land. We're not going to fill all of it. Some of it is going to remain, kind of undeveloped, which is just fine with us because that provides interpretive opportunities to do camps for kids or outdoor exercises that we can't even fully imagine right now. But we can imagine and currently, clearly understand the need for kind of a formal parade ground area outside of the main doors of the museum. That would be the location for change of command ceremonies that Camp Ripley has done on occasion and will continue to do. They sort of lack that currently. So to have that formal parade ground feel for part of that 30-acre plot is something I'm really excited about.
Okay, and so this museum will honor all branches of the military from all different eras, is that right?
It is right. It's our board has been pretty insistent. Camp Ripley in Little Falls, Falls, if you look at a map, it's the heart of the state in many ways. And Camp Ripley itself, organized and founded in 1930, is coming up on its own centennial anniversary here in 2030. So it in and of itself, in some ways, is historic, militarily for sure. And so to be there in the heart of the state makes a lot of sense. We're adjacent to that cemetery. We're right next to the river. We're along one of the busiest traffic corridors in the summer. So being located there makes good sense for a whole bunch of reasons. But at the same time, our board has been pretty insistent that we have a statewide presence. So even though we hope and expect and will develop a space deserving of a drive of a few hours perhaps to see it, we also want to be active in all 87 counties and honor and recognize and represent veterans from all 87 counties. Beyond representing them statewide, we also want to make sure that all service branches are also represented. So to your point, yes, exactly. It's really dedicated to all service branches. Certainly Camp Ripley, a National Guard facility, will have its share of information there, but our charge really is to represent all service branches in the entire state of Minnesota.
And what sorts of artifacts can people expect to see when this is fully opened? And
yeah,
can you give us a few examples?
Sure, absolutely. It goes maybe expectedly from very small to very large, and both are equally important. At the heart of it really is telling veteran stories. Stories and artifacts related to individual veteran experiences is at the heart of what we do. Those letters back and forth between loved ones, the diaries, the photographs, the medals, the keepsakes. Those are the kinds of things that enrich stories, right? So we want to organize everything we have around those individual artifacts of Minnesota men and women who have served. Big artifacts that speak to that. The the biggest would in this case be the sail and rudder of the USS Minneapolis St. Paul, Los Angeles class nuclear submarine that was decommissioned in 2008. Was put into service back in 1984 by the United States Navy. The Navy again decommissioned that large 360-foot submarine back in 2008. The Navy typically gives states and locales the chance to claim some part of its own naval history by going out and getting the final pieces of that submarine. The conning tower, which is called the sail, in this case of the submarine, was something they typically make available. After a number of years of unsuccessful attempts, Anderson Trucking out of the St. Cloud area donated their services to go out and get that piece for us. In this case, it was pieces requiring 4 semi-tractor trailers to transport it back to Camp Ripley, where it is now. It needs to undergo extensive restoration because it was sitting outside for 15 years. But the plan is to then restore it to its original glory and install it on the grounds of Camp Ripley. So to have a submarine seemingly emerge from the grasslands of central Minnesota will be a pretty dramatic piece. But more true to what I was speaking of earlier, having that piece there is only good if we can attach it to a Minnesota veteran. So in this case, Neil Rondorf from Thief River Falls, of all places. Neil, as a young man, a boy even, was a voracious reader, joined the Naval Academy and became a submarine captain and happened to be assigned to this particular sub. So to have a Minnesotan recently captain the USS Minneapolis St. Paul, and to have him on camera is what makes all this kind of come alive, at least for me, and I hope for others. So that's probably the biggest thing that we'll have, because it weighs 35,000 tons. So it has a weight to it. And it's not the entire submarine, but it will certainly look like it is as it's emerging from outside of those parade grounds. And then, the smallest being, a Medal of Honor or more. We have several in our collection, a very small item relative to a submarine, but what the Medal of Honor is and what it represents, and the fact that families have chosen to share those with us for the purpose of sharing with all of you, your readers and listeners, is a privilege to be able to do that. And so from something as small as an individual medal to as large as a submarine, and tanks and helicopters and jeeps and rifles in between are the kinds of things that people will see in our new space.
Well, I would think that would attract interest from not just Minnesota, but all over the country to see something like that. And what about the submarine? When and where did that actually serve, and what era is that from?
Yeah, it's a Cold War era submarine. Saw service in the Mediterranean during the first Gulf War. Again, went into service in 1984. Came out of service in 2008. And so, and that actually speaks to two things. One, back to the idea that, okay, you say you want to represent all service branches. What are some examples of that? Well, a submarine on the grounds is a good testament to our commitment to doing all service branches. There's not many museums that have that. So it's that, and it also speaks to a real interest of ours to, predictably and justifiably, we're going to tell the World War II story. At Pearl Harbor with the boys aboard the USS Ward, and the flag raiser at Iwo Jima from Richfield, and we're going to tell the stories of the first Minnesota at Gettysburg. But we don't want to miss the chance, and nor should we ever, to tell the stories of Cold War veterans. And so this Cold War submarine is a chance to tell and delve deeper into the Cold War stories that frankly aren't told enough, because it gets overlooked, overshadowed in some cases by the more dramatic moments. But boy, there are plenty of dramatic moments in the Cold War.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the flag raiser from Richfield. I live in Richfield, and I believe he unfortunately passed away not too awfully long ago, but he used to be in the parades and so forth, and 4th of July parades, and pretty cool to have his memory preserved there as well.
Yep, absolutely.
So how do you display something like a submarine?
Well, in that case, we're going to go back to our friends at HGA, right?
Yeah.
They're going to help. Landscape architecture is an important part of this experience. So it will certainly be outdoors, but we want to create what I'll say is a silhouette of a submarine, as if it were breaking water, and you'd see the wake of a 360-foot submarine on those 30 acres. It's the benefit of having Bob Anderson, donate 30 acres to us, is the chance that you can actually showcase a full-sized representation of a submarine. Because what you don't want to do is, well, what would be regrettable is to have the conning tower emerge from the grass, of course, and have it lit with the American flag on top and the markings SSN 708. And then not do justice by showing people, or at least suggesting to people, what does the size of this thing actually mean. So to see it represented in its full length, it is pretty compelling, because when you see that, then you start to ask a whole ton of questions that you wouldn't be well suited to ask if you just had the impression that this is just an individual artifact. We're going to try to create a sense of proportion and understand exactly what these submarines do. So, there's a whole effort underway with Brooks Berg from the eastern metro area to interview submarine veterans from across the state of Minnesota and gather those stories, because that, again, is a story that here in Minnesota, at least, we probably don't think enough of. And there are certainly a good number of submariners, veterans here in Minnesota, and we're committed to interviewing a whole bunch of them to bring that sub to life.
Well, that's fascinating, and I'm learning something here right now too, because I wouldn't imagine a lot of submariners coming from Minnesota, but I'm finding I'm learning some new things, like I said. So what can you tell us about? We had the groundbreaking on Sunday, the ceremonial groundbreaking. What can you tell us about the start of actual construction and what's happening there right now on the site?
Sure. As a museum professional, I'm happy to say that the actual management of the entire construction process is not one that falls to me, which I'm internally grateful for. In this case, our partners in this effort, the Department of Military Affairs, has done it for decades with armories that people see across the state of Minnesota. This is one of those buildings under that umbrella. So thankfully, the experts who manage construction projects like this at the Department of Military Affairs, by extension, being part of Camp Ripley, manage this process for me. And that allows us to focus on interviews with veterans and gathering those stories. Thankfully, really appreciative of Camp Ripley for being such good partners. Having done the ceremonial groundbreaking this fall yet, before the weather changes on all of us, in reality, construction will begin in earnest next spring, with the idea that construction is going to take 18 months, provided that our 4 seasons or 2 seasons here in Minnesota work in our favor. So if we start construction in earnest next spring of 2024, 18 months would be completion about Veterans Day, if I can put it in those terms, Veterans Day of 2025, 18 months later. And then what we need to do is have some time to move those Jeeps and those tanks and those 80,000 artifacts and those medals of honor and the 15,000 books in our library and much, much more out to that site once we can occupy it properly. So what that means is completion for construction, probably Veterans Day of 2025, a grand opening targeted for Memorial Day of 2026.
Wow, that's quite an undertaking. And I don't know if you can speak to this at all, but it seems like this would be a great project to have some sort of a special focus on putting veterans to work on the actual construction. Do you have any goals in that regard, or anything that, like I said, I don't know if you can speak to that, but is there any goals for veteran participation in the project?
Yeah, and that's a terrific question. That's probably the best question we've gotten over the last year or so. And yeah, because it's people feel good about contributing to it, I believe. And we want to, kind of profile those organizations, and then 2, even those individuals that are coming together to help make all this happen. And so inviting veterans to have a hand in that is something that we're counting on, and something we wanted. I mean, that's a story in and of itself. We talk about military history, and again, the global war on terrorism and Vietnam and Korea and all that, but and that's crucial. That's the heart of this. But at the same time, taking the time and using the space to also tell the stories of how veterans have helped create that museum, and how, for that matter, how veterans have built a lot of other things in Minnesota, supporting in any number of ways that people don't always track because there's not been a way to track it. So that's something that I'd love the museum interpretation to touch on, is the contributions veterans have made post-service. But again, specific to your question, yes, Anderson Trucking, like I mentioned, transporting the submarine pieces back to us, did that without charge. There's certainly veterans that were drivers of those pieces back here from Bremerton Naval Yard in Washington. Those veteran drivers had the chance to bring these pieces of naval history back to us. We have a World War II glider trainer being worked on. We have Brooks Berg, who I mentioned, who's overseeing the construction and restoration of that sub, who's also a veteran. So more and more, kind of the word is going out that if you want to contribute, there's an endless list and opportunities to participate and have a hand in creating this museum. So we're going to need a lot of help in a lot of different ways to restore some key pieces that we have touched on and others that we haven't. And then even once we're open, want veterans to serve as docents in this new space. It's going to be it's going to be a shiny space. It's going to look great. It's going to be well lit. It's going to feel fresh and warm and welcoming. But what really, in my experience, having gone to many museums, for the purpose of organizing this one is, being greeted by somebody, at the front door who can answer your questions, orient you to where you are and where you might want to go and what you might want to see and find out is really valuable. And so in that case, veterans serving as docents, I think would be a great model to use because it makes that connection all the more powerful for our visitors.
Oh, absolutely. Well, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Randall, and how you got involved in this, how you became interested in military history, museums?
No, it's a lot of it is with the support of our board of volunteers. I did have the chance to work for about a dozen years at the State Historical Society. While there, worked on an intensive project that was entitled the Greatest Generation Project with General John Vesey, who was the chairman of the effort. To do that, there's an exhibit that still resides in St. Paul at the History Center that is part of that effort from years ago. And then had the opportunity to work as director here about 7 years ago at the Minnesota Military and Veterans Museum, and having met General Joseph Votel out of the Lake Elmo area, head of Central Command up until just a couple of years ago, oversaw the effort to really eliminate ISIS when that was really at its height during the closing years of the global war on terrorism. He was the first to jump into Afghanistan in October of 2001 with the 75th Rangers. So just the chance to work with all these fine veterans has been terribly rewarding and just an awful lot of fun too, to hear their stories and try to do justice by honoring them and sharing their stories with others.
All right. Well, it's a great project, and I'm really excited to see it coming together, and look forward to when it will actually be built and open. And my father was a World War II veteran. I don't know if you can see here the flag in the background. That was from his casket. He passed away in 1999, but he would have been thrilled too to see something like this happening, I'm sure. And so good for you and everybody else who made this project possible. Any other thoughts, Randall, before I let you go?
No, I think if you'll allow me, I will send you just a link to a Zoom meeting of our own. Part of our effort, having done that dedication on Sunday, was to now hold on a monthly basis until the grand opening. So next 30 months or so, just a monthly check-in, a Zoom meeting that anybody's welcome to participate in. Each of those meetings will have a different kind of theme or topic, touching on what are we doing with the museum? How can we do it better? Is there input from others statewide that might want to join in to offer ideas and perspectives? So it's meant to open up communication with veterans and everyone statewide by participating in these virtual meetings once a month. And I'll send you that link, sir.
That sounds great. And let's definitely keep in touch. And so where can people go to get more information about the museum or some of the meetings that you've been talking about? Can you just put in a plug for that real quick?
Yes, thank you. The best place for people to track our progress and even provide their own input as we are developing these pieces for the new museum is to visit our website. That's mnvetmuseum.org. So minvetmuseum.org will be the location where people can find more information about the construction process, and also information about how to join us on a monthly basis via virtual meetings on Zoom to talk about various topics with the new museum and offer their own input and ideas about how to make it even better.
Well, great. Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Dietrich. Good luck with the project, and hopefully we can stay in touch.
I welcome that. Yes, very much. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you. Nice talking to you. Take care.
You too.